الله عليك يا رسول الله صلى الله عليك يا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله يا رحمة الله الواسعة ويا باب نجاة الأمة سيدي إن لم يجبك بدني عند استغاثتك أو لساني عند استنصارك فقد أجابك قلبي وسمعي وبصري لبيك داعي الله لبيك لبيك يا أبا عبد الله ما خاب من تمسك بكم وأمن من لجأ إليكم يا ليتنا كنا معكم سيدي فنفوز فوزا عظيما يقول الله في كتابه الكريم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وأمرهم شورى بينهم آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم صلوا على محمد وآل محمد We could do much better than that. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. The Shia Marja'iya is an institution that is rooted within history, heritage, jurisprudence, logic. And you also have the Sunni Fiqh Council, which is rooted in a centralized council of membership that determine the ultimate conclusions of the everyday average Muslim's life, depending and contingent on the opinion of the state. Tonight's discussion revolves around the source of opinion, of fatwa, in comparison and juxtaposing the Shia Marja'iya versus the Sunni Fiqh Council. As you all know, there is no such thing as Marja'iya when it comes to the worldview of our dear brothers and sisters from Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah. And there is no point to be sectarian in any manner whatsoever. However, for far too long, especially in light of the past 2 years, where our maraji' were at the forefront of either condemning genocide, of either resisting genocide, of either aiding those who were in the front lines, of those who found it part of their mission and life purpose to be a resistance against the dhulm that we see in the world today. And it's not just the last 2 years, but it became quite obvious that our marji'iyah plays a significant role. And as a result, you found many who mocked our maraji'. You found them quite insulting and disgusting when you see a picture of Al-Imam Al-Sistani, or Sayyid Ali Al-Khamenei, or Sayyid Ayatollah Al-Khomeini, or Sayyid Ayatollah Al-Khoi, or any of the maraji' in Qum. As Shia, we find that deplorable, reprehensible, that because I come from a different worldview, you find it necessary to insult my ulama, to make fun of my ulama, even though we differ on a jurisprudential and theological level. I don't denounce your humanity. I recognize you as the human you are that has a different conclusion, but I will also resist you when you try to encourage those and bring up a generation to find it normal to mock the Shia lovers of Ahlul Bayt and their leaders and symbols. It was our maraji' who told us don't insult their leaders directly and vehemently, and you have some respect, as how I would hate someone to insult Imam Amir al-Mu'minin in my face. Just because of respect, I will not insult your leaders into your face. But if you keep pushing and you keep nagging and you keep mocking my ulama, and how when you destroyed and take over the shrines of the Ahlul Bayt, whether it was in 06 in Iraq with Imam al-Hadi shrine and you bombed it using fatawa, people look beyond this. They think these were all movements motivated by surrogates that found it part of a political ideology rather than a religious one. Or Daesh that took over the shrine of Hijr bin Adi al-Kindi and literally exhumed the body of the man that we would go do ziyarah. Many of us went to his ziyarah in Sham. Many of us did his ziyarah. And now lately of Sayyidah Zainab salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayha, that just in the fronts of the beginning entrance, they would find it normal to put pictures of our ulama. You stample on them. And this led to the following few questions. That what is the difference between the source of legal edicts between the Shia narrative and the non-Shia narrative? How are Islamic laws derived? Is ijtihad a legitimate view when it comes to those from the non-Shia worldview? Or did those doors close in the line of 4 medieval scholars? In the Shia worldview, which is more superior when we come examining the question of you have one marja', but we have a council, and 2 heads are better than 1. And for that reason, you are at a disadvantage. Why don't you have multiple people all agreeing on one opinion regarding a real world issue? Bioethics, euthanasia, Bitcoin, currencies, these aspects of everyday life. You have one man you're depending on sitting in Najaf, sitting in Qom, sitting elsewhere, whereas we have a council. Not only that, our council is backed by the state. So when a fatwa is issued, the whole government follows. The whole citizenship has to follow. Isn't that better for unity purposes, for less confusion? Whereas in one household, you might find someone does the taqleed of a marja' who had passed, and they do istishab, meaning continue. The law of continuity in the rule of Marja'iya is that if you followed a marja' and they had passed away, you are allowed to stay on their taqleed. But for those that never caught that reign of their Marja'iya, they must follow another marja' who is the most a'lam today. So in one household, you might have 2 different worldviews. Is that not a disadvantage when it comes to our worldview, coming from the angle of a fiqh council, lajnat istifta' or darul ifta'? How do we analyze these brothers and sisters so that we can give a response for those who find it normal to mock our ulama, to look down at our scholars and rub it in our faces as in you are already at a disadvantage when it comes to your religious worldview? What difference does it make if I mock such individuals at the same time? Let us look into this discussion and see where it stems from after ilat salawat ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. The first argument that is posed is that, well, number one, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala insisted that you have to refer to the jama'ah. Allah in the Holy Quran, in multiple cases, encourages the mu'minun to counsel among one another. وَأَمْرُهُمْ شُورَى بَيْنَهُمْ. That in their case and their affair is that which is discussed among them. Your case and your affairs in life, you have to discuss with others. وَشَاوِرْهُمْ فِي الْأَمْرِ. And counsel them when it comes to the issue. These are all verses of the Quran that encourage what? Counselship, meaning seek the opinion of someone else. Go get the other perspective. So this could be used as leverage against us. Your Marja'iya system is flawed. It's not consistent with the Holy Quran. You got one man calling the shots. When the Quran insists, go find differences of opinions and then form a conclusion. The beautiful thing is, when we look at verses of the Quran, we also have to look at the world of tafsir. And you find that these verses were revealed in 2 situations. وَأَمْرُهُمْ شُورَى بَيْنَهُمْ is describing the people of Medina. The people of Medina, Rasulullah praises them. He says, you istaqamu, you stayed firm, istajabu to Allah. Wa aqamu salat. And then, وَأَمْرُهُمْ شُورَى بَيْنَهُمْ. That you answered the call of Allah. That when the Prophet migrated to Medina, you Ansar, you accepted him. Good. Not just that, you began to pray. That's even more beautiful. And not just that, you counsel one another. This is in reference to the beauty of partnership, the beauty of working together. Now the only thing is, this is not in reference to religion. Not at all. This is in reference to everyday affairs. How do you know this from the ayah? It says, وَأَمْرُهُمْ شُورَى بَيْنَهُمْ. Their issues, they discuss with one another. In our world, a concern that only has the interest of society and not religiosity is your concern. If you live in a town and you call the shots, how many roads should we build? That's not something you refer to Allah regarding. Of course, you can inquire, Ya Allah, give us barakah, give us tawfiq. And this, by the way, leads to the discussion of istikhara. You know, istikhara, any Arabic word that begins with I-S-T, let's say using English, istighfar, istikhara. These terms involve a type of plea. Yani astaghfirullah, astaghfirullah, I ask your counsel. Istikhara here is used when you are 50-50 divided. 50-50 divided. Not, I know what I should do, but I need to do istikhara. This is not encouraged. And there are certain cases in life where absolutely istikhara is not encouraged. And you all can immediately guess, marriage. If you're already down and you're interested and the other side is interested and there really isn't any red flag, it's just, I want an extra push. That extra push is not where the Quran comes in. That's, you have to have tawakkul at that point. Istikhara, we always like to say, al-khira and al-hira. That when you are muthayyar, when you're confused, that is like a fine, do istikhara right then and there. But if there are red flags that make you 50-50, then in that case you could do istikhara and consult the guidance of the Quran in this case, after exhausting all your efforts first. Amruhum is, how should we live our lives today? This doesn't have to do with imamah, leadership, khilafah. This has to do with day-to-day affairs. And this is also found in the event of the battle of Khandaq. Khandaq, as you all know, means trench. Khandaq, trench. In the city of Medina, the battle of Khandaq happened. Ahzab, where the Banu Quraysh came with a very formidable force, where they had that big giant Amr ibn Wid, and he came forth and they said to Rasulullah, Ya Rasulullah, it's game over. We want to thank you for all your hard work and bringing us Islam and enlightening us and taking us from al-dhulumat ila nur, game over. It's like, what are you talking about? He says they sent an army twice as big as the time they sent during Badr and Uhud. So it's game over. Allah revealed to Rasulullah, let them consult. وَشَاوِرْهُمْ فِي الْأَمْرِ. Al-Amr, Alif Lam Amr, is this issue. This issue. Why we have to emphasize that it's referencing a particular issue is because this is used to determine the legitimacy of Saqifa. Saqifa, to discuss and determine the fact that the Khilafah of the first Khalifa was legitimate, they reference this ayah. They say that Allah encourages counseling one another, so Saqifa, which is exactly the equivalent of a UFC boxing match, although boxing match is different than UFC, where punch-up happened, and Imam Ali is not even present. So even if you wanted to use this ayah as legitimizing this event, where you try to elect a leader after Rasulullah, at least have the electorate present. What kind of election is it where the most critical of the electorate is not present? Imam Ali is busy burying Rasulullah, washing his body. Even if you use that ayah, it didn't even get fulfilled. But that ayah is in reference to what? This issue. Rasulullah, tell them, how should we approach this problem? وَشَاوِرْهُمْ فِي الْأَمْرِ. Guys, we have an army coming. What do? Salman al-Muhammadi said, Ya Rasulullah. In Persia, if a town was going to become sieged, we would always dig a trench, a khandaq. Ya Rasulullah, Medina isn't that big. By the way, you know how big Medina Munawwara proper is, Medina al-Qadima. It's as big as the haram of Rasulullah today. The haram in Medina is exactly how big Medina was then. Now Medina expanded, but Medina proper is that, with Baqi' and the haram. The haram is pretty big, but that's it. That was Medina. So he said, Ya Rasulullah, I suggest and propose that we dig a khandaq. Rasulullah said, great idea. Now, does this mean Rasulullah doesn't know what to do? Rasulullah wants to encourage, Ya Ammi, get other opinions. You're not Maliki Yawmuddin. At the end of the day, ask other people's opinions. And I even recommend, ask people's opinions who you would normally not think would give you some sort of helpful advice. Ask your little son, your little brother. I was absolutely enamored when I met one of the ulama in Najaf al-Ashraf, although he's from Qum, an alim and mujtahid, who said to me, Sayyidina, I have a question for you. What is your opinion about this idea? He asked me about an idea and he wanted to know my opinion. I said, Sayyidina, who am I? He said, no, I'd like to hear your opinion because there's a beauty to perspective. I can't claim I have perspective, but some people in life, they're not willing to hear other people's opinions. They think they know everything. Perspective is the most beautiful thing ever. because it adds variety to life. It gives you an alternative opinion. Always counsel others. Ask them, hey, I'm thinking of moving. I heard good ideas about moving to that part of town. However, that part of town, I didn't hear anything bad about it. Can you tell me what you think? Always ask other people's opinions. Rasulullah is trying to instill this with people. Rasulullah otherwise knows it's just a trench. I could do that. But when Rasulullah shows them that Salman, of course, Salman was a source of being bullied, because they would always say, Salman al-Farisi, be quiet, you Farisi, you Ajami, you foreigner. To which Rasulullah sees him, he says, Salman, what troubles you? He says, Ya Rasulullah, they keep calling me foreigner. And back then they had Arab supremacy and nationalism, and we are top of the fish, and you're bottom fish. Rasulullah says, tell them, Salmanun minna ahl al-bayt. You are Salman al-Muhammadi instead. Sallu ala Muhammad. And now when Rasulullah shows them, look how Salman's opinion was very helpful. Don't say, we can't care about your idea because you're a foreigner. Don't even say, I don't care about your opinion because you're not from my community. You're not from my country. And one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen is in communities like this, where you have someone who's a Lebanese, who's an Iraqi, who's a convert, who's the Polynesian, who's someone that is originally Australian, who's someone that we had brothers who are Bahraini, we had brothers that were Suri. The other day they showed up, Syrian, non-Shia, and that brought us so much joy to see the unity of our gathering here. It shows that you are welcomed and your opinion matters. It doesn't matter if you're Ajami, Farisi. Under the tent of the Thaqalain, you are all Muhammadi, inshallah. Rasulullah shows that, look, Salman's idea is pretty good. They said, you know what, we can dig a trench around Medina al-Munawwara. So Rasulullah grabs the spear and he stabs it to the ground. He says, from right here, and he walks a few paces and he gets another spear, and right here. This is the width. And this is how deep it'll be. And you dig it around the entire city of Medina al-Munawwara. But what is this in reference to? Theology or real world affairs? It's in reference to an issue right now. This has nothing to do with the deen of Allah. This has nothing to do with the case regarding Allah's divine judgment, because Allah's divine judgment is His. And how you can prove that is that Khilafah and Allah's divine covenant comes only up, down, not down, up. وَإِذْ قَالَ رَبُّكَ لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً. I will bring on the ground a caliph. This is before Adam was even existent. Allah says, before I place the first human being, I need to make sure there's a khalifa already there. I choose the khalifa. Inni, ana. But when it comes to Rasulullah, yeah, you choose. Excuse me, what's your proof? وَأَمْرُهُمْ شُورَى بَيْنُهُمْ. But that's about khandaq. That's about societal issues. Yeah, whatever, no problem. And not only that, the shura is not even going to include Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib. The most critical of those, you should at least seek their counsel. Later on, they would learn, by the way. And they would ask, Ya Ali, what do we do in this situation? And Imam Ali would answer. And then they would say, Lawla Ali lahalakt. Had it not been for him, man, I would have been messed up. Ali ibn Abi Talib would get involved. In fact, Uthman ibn Affan consults Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen on the codifying of the Quran. Open any Quran today, printed in Saudi, printed in Egypt. Open any Quran, you will find the beginning. It says this Quran narrated by Hafs and Asim and Sulami is in reference to Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam's approval. Imam Ali helped the codifying process of the Holy Quran al-Kareem that we have today. So he would get involved. He would give the opinions. But initially they would not care, because if his opinion goes against our agenda, power-hungry purposes, then I'm sorry, we're not going to consult you. And that's why when you find that today, in our worldview, we have, in the absence of a publicly accessible ma'soom, we refer to the next best thing. But the question still remains. And you do taqleed of a marji'. A marji' deen is one man. And I, by the way, it's a good argument. It's not a bad one. It's one man. One man is not enough to determine the haqq completely. Don't you agree you should consult others? Oh, well, I agree with you. You just said, shawirhum. Then shouldn't he at least have like a team? Number one, our maraji do have teams. They do have teams. It's a question coming from a place of slight ignorance about how the Marja'iya institution works. If you look, for example, quickly, I'll give you. Sayyid Ali al-Khamenei. There's a whole council called Al-Khubragan. These are supreme mujtahid jurists, over 70 of them. And they always study the decision making and the fatwa of that marja' deen. They are mujtahids, and they can only be mujtahids, meaning jurists to the highest caliber. And they analyze his opinions constantly to criticize at times jurisprudentially, maybe an opinion wasn't taken into consideration. He has over 70, that's one example. As-Sayyid al-Khoi, do you know who he had? He had Al-Shaheed Baqir al-Sadr in his council, As-Sayyid Ali Sistani in his council, Al-Mirza Ali, Al-Shaheed Mirza Ali al-Gharawi in his council, Al-Shaheed Beheshti in his council, As-Sayyid Murtada al-Naqshawani in his council. He had so many ulama, Agha Rida, As-Sayyid Muhammad Rida al-Khalkhali in his council. And this is called the Istifta team of Ayatollah al-Khoi. It's his opinion. But Sayyid al-Khoi would say, all of you, imagine part of your council is Sistani. Part of your council is Baqir al-Sadr. Imagine that. All of you, I've received this question. How would you answer this? And the final say rests with him. That's it. That's a team. But the final say is based on whose methodologies? As Sayyid al-Khoi. The difference is, he has methodologies. We spoke yesterday about the methodology of Sayyid al-Khoi when it comes to the opinion of al-wadh' al-alfadh ala al-ma'ani, applying terminologies to their meaning and how it differentiates with certain scholars, that Sayyid al-Khoi believes the term literally ta'ahud, whereas maybe Sayyid Sistani believes in what is called ho-hawiyya, or Sayyid al-Shaheed al-Sadr al-Qarn al-Akid, and these things have different ramifications jurisprudentially speaking. That's his methodology. And so he asks his team, you guys, based on my methodology, how would you answer this question? Cloning was a big issue. And Mirza Jawad al-Tabrizi was part of his council. Today, whether you look at Sayyid Ali Sistani and Ayatollah Sayyid Munir al-Khabbaz, or Ayatollah Sheikh Hassan al-Jawahiri, or Ayatollah Sheikh Baqir al-Irawani, or Ayatollah Sheikh, for example, Hadi al-Radi, part of the team council of Sayyid Ali Sistani. It's not that he is on his own, stranded. Here's an opinion, let me tackle it by myself, and no one has the right to give me their view. La. They need to ask others, because if it was left to that, here's a question regarding Bitcoin. What, you want to say to go Google all day? Figure out what that is? He asked, hey, you, tell me, what is this exactly? How does this work? Based on what conditions does it operate? What do you mean by decentralized? And how does this work when it comes to riba? How does it work when it comes to loans? Is this a real naqd of currency or not? And so he has to counsel. So for those that say it's a one-man team and it's his game, that's not genuinely sincere. The opposite is more faulty. How? Fiqh councils today, whether you look at Darul Ifta al-Masriya in Egypt, or you look at the International Fiqh Council of Saudi, or you look at Darul Ifta al-Tunisiya, Darul Ifta al-Urdaniya. These are all jurisprudential legal fiqh councils. When they issue a fatwa, like the new moon sighting of Shahr Ramadan, it's a collection of men. These men are all gathered and they say, guys, tomorrow is Eid. Have you guys remembered last Shahr Ramadan? The confusion that emerged? Where the new moon was impossible to be seen, but they said still tomorrow is Eid. Tomorrow is Shahr Ramadan. Based on what view? The Dar al-Ifta, Lajnat al-Istifta issued the fatwa. Then I have a question. This Lajna, this council, who assigned them? This is very important. Who assigned them to be here? Because you have to be sincere about God's deen. This is not deen. This is deen. You have to be serious. Because you're telling this is what God wants. Who put you, who gave you the right? The head of state. The Grand Mufti of Al-Azhar, Ahmed al-Tayyib, Mufti of Al-Azhar University. This is the biggest council marja'iyya equivalent to the non-Shia of Al-Azhar. He is chosen by As-Sisi. Abdel Fattah As-Sisi chose him. Before he came into office, he was wearing a suit and a tie. I'm not attacking anyone ad hominemly, but I'm just saying if this is the next best thing to Rasulullah, to you, I need to understand your backing and your source. The government assigned you. That's fine. Maybe the government knows that you're the most intelligent in fiqh. You're the most intelligent in theology. You're the most intelligent in real world affairs. But that means you are beholden to who then? The government. Abdul Aziz bin Abdullah al-Sheikh, Grand Mufti of Saudi, who puts him up? Does his intelligence qualify him to that position? Or is there someone of a royal family that puts him? The royal family chooses him. And you must definitely maintain your synchronized views with our views as well. The Imam and Grand Mufti of Turkey, called Diyanat, which is a council. Do you know how he's chosen? Oh, Recep Tayyip Erdogan chose him. Because he knows exactly how to pick the next marja in their worldview. Because he, mashallah, has studied fiqh and things of that nature. This is not a decentralized system. It showcases that al-madhhab ma'a man ghalab. I'm sorry. The madhhab is whoever is in charge. And this is not necessarily too insincere. Why? Because if you look at that narrative's history, with all due love and respect, it's a deen based on honoring the Khalifa. Because you have the Sahih Hadith in Bukhari and in Muslim and in Musnad Ahmad ibn Hanbal. All three narrated by Hudhayfa ibn al-Yaman, to which he said, Qala Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi, if the Amir flogs your back and steals your money, istama' wa ati'hu, you listen to him and you obey him. If he hurts you, punishes you, is he cruel and he's a dictator, and he steals your money, you shut up and you obey him. That's the Amir. That's why you honor the Khalifa. You don't protest against the Khalifa, the Imam. And any protest against the Imam is going to legitimize your own capital punishment. And that's why it's no surprise that certain people today, they cannot stand but have to say, look, Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam was going against the leader of his time. And Yazid is his leader, and the role was to just listen to what he wanted, even if he's evil. And I asked some of these when ISIS rose, how do you refuse the legitimacy of al-Baghdadi? I wonder how. Because if the rule is to listen and be quiet, what disqualifies him? Because he killed people? Shar'an, in your narrative, what disqualifies him? The problem is when you tie someone's faith to the state and capital and head of a country, it becomes very corrupt, because you cannot speak unless you speak in the opinion of that country. Now I ask you today, ready? If the president of Iraq, Mohammed Shia Al-Sudani, he chose the Marja'iya, do you think that would be in our interest? Pezeshkian, he chose the next rahbar. What's his name? Joseph Aoun, he chose the next leader of Majlis al-Islami Shia al-Ala. Yeah, because the president has to pick. That's the council, right? Don't go against the leader. How do you sleep at night? I wonder, how do you sleep? And the next time you step on my ulama's photos on the floor, I want you to know that these are independent thinkers. Decentralized. Not related to any institution because of money or power. Non-corrupt. Using genuine sincerity. That I will speak of what God wants, not what Abdullah wants, of what Allah wants. Come and make fun of my ulama. Those who stood against corruption and tyranny and are genuine and sincere based on the narrations of Allah and Ahlul Bayt and the Quran. Not tied to anything. And they're the first to criticize certain leaderships and powers and hegemonies if they see them going out of line. But if you're beholden to a narration that says, don't even protest against your Amir, even if he flogs your back or steals your money, then I understand now how you justified the Khilafah of Yazid ibn Muawiyah. Because even if he's evil, you have to follow. Istami' wa ati'. That's one major flaw, that I can't sleep at night. I lose sleep. That there are billions of Muslims, their deen is based on what some guy in a suit and a tie says, hey, today I feel tomorrow's Eid, make the Mufti say the same thing. Is that deen? That's the religion now? And this didn't start today, this didn't start yesterday or yesteryear. This started in the likes such as Malik ibn Anas and his Muwatta, Abu Ja'far al-Mansur al-Dewaniqi. Abu Ja'far al-Mansur al-Dewaniqi is the Khalifa during the time of who Imam? Which one? You're all historians. Al-Imam al-Baqir and Imam al-Sadiq. Al-Dewaniqi is the one who poisoned Imam al-Sadiq. This rubbish Khalifa, al-Dewaniqi, poisoned the Imam because of his jealousy. Al-Dewaniqi says we now have a government and we need to have a constitution that needs to be Islamic. Who is the supreme judge of my land right now? Oh, my advisors. They said, could you find anyone better than Malik al-Imam? Malik ibn Anas? So he's the supreme judge? He says, yes, Malik. Malik, oh Shaykh, you have been administered as the grand Imam of my Khilafah. Malik ibn Anas, the Imam of the Maliki school, write for me a constitution. This constitution make it easy for people. وَوَطِّئْهُ لِلنَّاسِ. And what did he write? The Muwatta of Malik. You know the Muwatta of Malik ibn Anas is a famous work akin to Bukhari and Muslim. And if you're a Maliki from that madhab, the Malikis, they pray with their hands to the side, similar to us. Malik ibn Anas, he had the famous opinion of Amal Ahl al-Madina is a hujjah as well. And so he wrote the Muwatta. And you know, Ahmad ibn Hanbal had the Musnad of Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, Al-Shafi'i, his Risala, and of course Abu Hanifa and his view of Abu Yusuf, his student as well. Malik ibn Anas had the Muwatta. If you're Maliki, this is your fiqh. But the problem is, when a government tells you, hey, religion, it's my way though. The constitution that you're going to write, don't include any hadith by Ali ibn Abi Talib. The Muwatta of Malik has 0 hadiths by Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib. Yeah, there are millions of people following it as the hujjah of Allah. Yeah, Imam Ali, who 30 years with the Prophet, he couldn't find a single thing to narrate about the Prophet. And someone like Abu Hurairah, who spent only 3 years with Rasulullah, has over 6,000 hadiths. Can you square that circle for me? Please square it. Because I find it rather disingenuous that because one man says, I don't like Ali ibn Abi Talib, don't include any of his ahadith in my work of constitution that is incumbent upon everyone to follow. That's the problem when a institution or a government or a khalifa chooses the religious source and a council based on their opinion, based on their worldview. What you have to have is a decentralized institution that has nothing to do with politics, in the sense that the leaders of government get to say who's in charge. Because إِذَا رَأَيْتَ الْعَالِمْ عَلَى بَابِ الْحَاكِمِ فَبِئْسَ الْعَالِمِ وَبِئْسَ الْحَاكِمِ وَإِذَا رَأَيْتَ الْعَالِمْ عَلَى بَابِ الْحَاكِمْ عَلَى بَابِ الْعَالِمِ فَنِعْمَ الْحَاكِمِ وَنِعْمَ الْعَالِمِ. If you find the scholar at the door of the politician, then woe upon that politician and woe upon that scholar. But if you find the politician on the door of the scholar, then blessed is that politician and blessed is that scholar. At the end of the day, even if you're a politician, you're not exempt from the sharia of Allah. You have to refer back to those of Ahl al-Ilm. Ya Aba, is this trade deal shari'i or not? Is imploring alcohol in our government necessary or not? That poison that is polluting the minds of our youth, drunk drivers, marijuana, these elements. Let me ask the Imam here. I ask you, even if you're Christian, ask the priest for goodness sake. He'll tell you, no, these are bad. Ask the monk, ask the Imam, Sunni and Shia. The politicians need to go back to the ulama. You're beholden to them. You're not above ilm. You're not above deen. You're not above God. And even in our Western world, it's one nation under God. Where did God go? It's one nation under a white-haired politician with a red tie. It has to be under what? The sense that I can't make a decision that's going to hurt people in the future because God is watching me. But this leaves us with the final idea. Wait a minute. Why, in the case, can't we have 2 maraji' working together? This was suggested, by the way, by Ayatollah Muntadhari. Ayatollah Muntadhari suggested that we should have 2 Marja'iya style systems. One who's a rahbar and one who's a marji'. One is a leader for Muslims, but his role does not enter the world of Islam. And the other should be intellectual strictly. And even then, we should add more. This is called wilayat al-fuqaha. as opposed to wilayat al-faqih. And the argument is logical. It's not like it's not logical. Having two heads is better than one. But what's the unrealistic flaw? The following. There is a type of scholar that you refer, by the way, someone once told me, Sayyidina, they're not going to get this. I said, do you know where I'm going? I'm going to Sydney community. They know this more than I do. This is not complicated. This is a community built on those who are studied and learned. Shame on some people who say, how about you dumb it down for the listener? No, I have to smart it up for them. I say something, they come and tell me, Sayyidina, we've heard this before. MashaAllah. A community, MashaAllah, that's built on study and ilm. There's no need to dumb down anything. This is how we have to keep working up, to keep up, MashaAllah, with the Jumhur. There's a scholar that is known for his style. Ayatullah al-Sayyid Abu al-Qasim al-Khoyi, Qaddasallah nafsahu al-Sharif, was known for a style that is typically referred to as a sana'i scholar. Sana'a in Arabic simply means constructive, meaning he would look at a hadith and he would apply the hadith and he would get a conclusion. He didn't necessarily invest too much attention on the context of the hadith. He would look at the chain of the hadith instead. He values whether or not the hadith is true. And as a result, Ayatullah al-Khoyi, his style was that he didn't include ijma' or shuhra. Ijma' means consensus. To him, Sayyid al-Khoyi says, the ulama can have a consensus, but I am not beholden to their consensus and their conclusion. I'll give you an example. Ready? The ijma' and the consensus of the early scholars, Mufid, Tusi, Saduq, Kulayni, Allama, Ibn al-Mutahhar, ila akhiri. These are all mutaqaddimin scholars. They would have a consensus. The consensus is not backed by a hadith, but they still had a consensus. For example, we don't have a hadith that says Ahlul Kitab are najis, but there are scholars that viewed Ahlul Kitab as najis. Many ulama did. But how did they base that opinion on? They said the ijma'. How else would these ulama come to that conclusion if they didn't have a reason? I don't see a hadith in front of me that says Ahlul Kitab najis. So I just trust that they're referring to something that didn't reach me today. Logically speaking, many works didn't reach us today. The Buwaid Empire destroyed many of the libraries. The Mughal Empire destroyed many of the libraries. And so we lost a hadith. Madinat al-Ilm of a Shaykh al-Saduq was lost. It was a volume as big as Bihar al-Anwar, and we lost it. So maybe they had access to something I don't have for them all to agree on one thing without a hadith being there. As Sayyid al-Khoyi says, but I think on my own, and just because a group agrees doesn't mean I have to agree with all of them. I take what's there, I apply, and I give a conclusion. As a result, he is known to be constructive in his methodology. Ayatullah al-Sayyid Hussein al-Barajurdi was different, and he was his predecessor. Al-Sayyid Hussein al-Barajurdi is what we call in the Hawza a maqasidi alim. Maqasid means what? It means what is the meaning and the message of what is being said or what is being relayed. What is the qasid? The purpose, the reason. Maqasid. Maqasidi ulama, what do they look at? They look at the meaning and the message of the context of the hadith. And they do take into consideration the ijma' of the scholars. To bring this closer, I will give you one example. There is a scholar or a narrator by the name of Hakim Mu'adhan Bani Isa. Hakim is a person who narrated a hadith from Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam. You're following me so far, right? Hakim narrates about 4 or 5 narrations. He met Imam al-Sadiq and he narrates a hadith about khums, strictly. That's it. How do we determine whether a person narrating a hadith is reliable or not? We look at the books of Ilm al-Rijal, the book of biographies. This is what is like an encyclopedia. Alif until za. Alif, for example, Abu Fulan, Abu Abdul Rahman, Ain, Ali ibn, for example, Ibrahim ibn Ali. And these are people, and you go to the side and it says, this person is thiqah, this person is muwathaq, this person is hasan, wadda', liar, kadhab, dajjal. You might find these. Who says this? The earlier books of Rijal al-Kashi, Fahrist of Tusi. These are early books of Ilm al-Rijal. So far, so good. As-Sayyid al-Hussein Barujurdi says, when you look at Hakim Mu'adhin Bani Isa, all the early works say that he is majhul al-hal. We don't know. We don't know. Is he reliable? We just don't know. As a result, based on the methodology of Ayatollah As-Sayyid al-Khoi, Sayyid al-Khoi works with what he has. He doesn't implore his own case when it comes to deducing and determining narration. He says, look, if the early scholars reported him as unsure, I'm going to take him as unsure. That's it. The report says unsure. So any hadith I find Hakim reporting, can I say it's a sahih hadith? No. But that doesn't mean it's false. It just doesn't mean it's a hujjah binding on me. So Sayyid al-Khoi, when he finds someone that's majhul, he says, look, I can't work with you, but I can't reject you. That's it. But Ajurdi says something else. He says, wait a minute, I know the early people said that he's majhul, unsure, jahl. I'm sure. But let's study him. Number one, Hakim, what's his full name? Mu'adhan Bani Isa. He's a mu'adhan. He did adhan for a family called Bani Isa. Bani Isa is a family, a tribe, probably in Kufa, but they were a Shia family. So what does that make Hakim probably? Shia. Because a Shia family will bring another Shia to work for them. Number two, he's a mu'adhin. Mu'adhin is a job back then that was serious. Today, anyone can do adhan. Back then, it was a legit job. Baba, we trust you to wake us up for salah. For dhuhr, asr, maghrib, isha. Yani you were trusted on awqat as-salah. We're not going to trust you on hadith. That's another context clue that Sayyid Barujurdi took into consideration. The fact he works with Shia, the fact his role is a mu'adhin, he's trustworthy. He's like, number three, look at his hadith. For goodness sake, look. As Sayyid al-Khoi says, I don't care about the metin, the content of the hadith to determine if it's true or not. I care about if the chain is true. If the chain of narrators going back to the initial person reporting him, if that's a good chain, then the hadith is true. The content is irrelevant to determining whether it's true or not. But just know, you have to look at the content. The content says that Hakim narrates a hadith about khums. That means Ahlul Bayt would only trust the close Shia if they were talking about khums. Because khums is a dangerous discussion in front of governments. Because you're talking about money going to the imam, not going to the khalifa. So they would only narrate this kind of hadith to those they trusted. Sayyid Barujudi says that's another context clue. He's trusted by critical. He's like, lastly, is what he is saying true or not? I mean, if he's talking about khums, is what he is saying true? Just look at it. The conclusion is, yeah, what he's saying is true. As Sayyid al-Khoi says to Sayyid Barujurdi, you think the early scholars, Tusi, Kashi, all of them, they didn't consider that? That's why they gave him majhul. Sayyid Barujurdi says, no. Given all of this, because the early sources say he's majhul, unsure, we don't know, Sayyid Barujurdi accepts him as thiqa, reliable. As a result, based on his context clue methodology, 3/4 of al-Kafi is sahih. 3/4, not all of it, according to Sayyid al-Barujurdi. Because of Sayyid al-Khoi's rigorous methodology, 3/4 of al-Kafi is not sahih. Do you see the difference? The difference based on how methodology can change. Looking at one, the Maqasidi, Ayatollah Barujurdi, looks at context clues. One, the Sana'i, Ayatollah al-Khoi, looks at, here, this is what I have, 1 + 1 = 2. I'm not going to change things based on how they are. These are, but by the way, both of them have a good argument to make. You think Allah and Ahlul Bayt would want us to go against what the early resources had, the Usul al-Arba'miyah, for example? These scholars, do you think they didn't consider this when they studied his life and wrote, we don't know? He makes a good argument, and the other one makes a very good argument. Look at the context. I tell you, put both of them in a fiqh council. You think they can both agree? Put 5 of them. Put 10 of them. The funny thing is, I saw in one of these fiqh councils is the fiqh council for women affairs. All the 15 people are men. So how do you know, man? You have to have a lady who says, listen, look, I think I know more about my situation, my circumstance. It's like the women fiqh council of the modern day. Not a single lady. You would think, for goodness sake. The other thing is, there's a little bit of racism involved as well. That you can't be part of the council if you're not from the country as well. If you want to be part of the Diyanet Council of Turkey, you have to be Turkish. If you want to be part of the Majlis al-Istifta al-Malizi, you have to be Malaysian. If you want to be part of the Dar al-Ifta al-Masriya, you have to be Egyptian. And you got to be lucky if the president picks you, who knows probably nothing about Sharia. But if you get lucky, then you're in. Now that's why if both of them have their own methodologies. Now some might say, yeah, they disagree that much. No. But if you have 5 people, you're going to say, well, let them all vote. So our deen becomes democracy now. So what makes us different from those who picked people on the day of Saqifa? We choose God's law. And then how do you sleep at night knowing that the fatwa you got, certain ulama who were on the team vehemently were rejecting it, but trust that because the majority won, then you're in good hands. Then is it all about majority or is it all about what Allah wants? I don't care if a majority say what you're doing is wrong. I just want to know, is what I'm doing right with Allah? If you see the whole world going this way, but you see Allah and Ahlul Bayt going this way, go with Allah, Ahlul Bayt. Who cares what the majority says? We are a deen built on a minority that always resisted the majority because hayhat min al-dhillah. That's all. We see that on the day of Ashura, 72 fought 30,000. If it's based on majority, guess who won then? If it's based on who's the most in the world, guess who won? But we don't care. Some of our youth tell us today, Ya Sayyidina, how are we on the haqq if we're the minority? Tell that to Sayyid al-Shuhada. Tell that to Rasulullah. Tell that to those who stood against injustice, but they were a minority, but anchored their name in history. Tell that to someone like Hurr ibn Yazid al-Riyahi. The funny thing is, Hurr ibn Yazid, and when we're talking about all of these scholars, they try their hardest to be truthful with themselves. If an opinion goes against their worldview, they can't reject it. It's like, my worldview might be a little different than what I initially concluded, or I might change my mind later. I have to be solid and say, look, I changed my mind. I changed my opinion. Like how Ayatollah al-Khoi changed his opinion about one of the narrators of Kamil al-Ziyarat. He would say that all the narrators of Kamil al-Ziyarat are thiqah. Until one day he researched more and he said, no, one guy is not thiqah. He's not. But the thing is, I've built a whole compendium of fatwas based on him, including some of the rulings. What do I do now? And he's in his late 90s. Guess what he did? He's like, easy. I'll go back all of my fatwas again. And he only had 2 fatwas change based on one man. That's called sincerity. That's called genuinity. That's called... Others will be like, you know what? Let's not make it look like we had to do a factory reset update. I'm talking about the deen of people and they're going to die on this. I have to be sincere. There is no democracy when it comes to the deen of people. You can't just say, let's all vote what God wants. Either God, you pick what he wants, or God picks what he wants. Hurr ibn Yazid, in his situation, it was interesting. Because he could go with the flow. He could go with the majority. Hurr ibn Yazid was assigned to be the leader for the first initial army Imam al-Hussein met. The first one. Because as you know, Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam arrives Karbala on the 2nd of Muharram. He initially has the water, Sayyid al-Shuhada. Hurr ibn Yazid is only assigned orders. That's all. Umar ibn Sa'd says, Ya Hurr, from Kufa, you go and you stop Hussein from entering Kufa. That's all. That's all. Just stop him. But we need you to negotiate with him. Hurr sees that Imam Hussein is blocking him from the water. Now, how is that? Imam Hussein has water. And then he says to him, Ya Hussein, we are thirsty. Imam Hussein says, come and drink. It's okay. Later on, it becomes salah time. Imam Hussein looks at Hurr and says, Ya Hurr, it's salah. How about we pray? Hurr says, let's pray. Hurr is stopping him from continuing. Imam says to him, you lead salah. You'll never find a more soft heart than Imam al-Hussein. That the man who's stopping him from his mission, he says to him, you lead salah. Hurr said, I can never do that when you're here. So what does that show you? It shows you he knows what's going on. He sees the truth, but he's just following orders. That's it. He's being sincere to himself. Later on, it's the case where he is told by Umar ibn Sa'd, listen, you're told to get allegiance from him. The problem is, you seem to be enjoying talking to him a lot. He says, there's nothing, what do you want me to do? Kill him? He says, no, just get allegiance or make him stay until he's compelled to give you allegiance to Yazid. Hurr ibn Yazid says, Ya Hussein, this is what is recorded as the water wars. Many people don't know much about this. The water wars, where now they begin to fight Imam al-Hussein pre-Ashura. It's a quick skirmish. Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas fought in this battle. There's a hadith that says Imam Zain al-Abidin also fought in this battle and he was lunged into his stomach. They slashed his stomach. According to certain schools of historians, they believe that's the reason why Imam Zain al-Abidin later could not fight in Ashura, because he was injured from the water wars. The Zaydis also include this. It is the case that no, Imam Zain al-Abidin was likely, according to the consensus of historians, ill, because we have ziyarat ya marid Karbala, ill. But there was a conflict. This conflict happened. Hur's soldiers get control of the Furat. Now Imam al-Hussein asks him, can we have some water? We've been out. This is when approximately the 7th of Muharram, the orders come and he says no. So when we gave you water, when we had control, now you have control and you're not going to give us water? What does Imam al-Hussein tell him? He says something that is quite astonishing. He says, ثَكَلَتْكَ أُمُّكَ. May your mother have never given birth to you. Some might say an imam would use such language. There's a purpose. He says, ثَكَلَتْكَ أُمُّكَ يَا حُرْ. After everything we did, how kind we were to you. When you now have the advantage, you stop us from water. And I hear my daughter Sayyida Sukaina saying, Al-Atash, Al-Atash. May your mother never have given birth to you. Hur, it's the biggest insult when you talk about someone's mom, right? It's the biggest insult. And you want to just lash back at them. Hur composes himself and he says, if your mother was any other lady, I would have said the same thing, Ya Hussein. But how can I insult a man whose mother is Fatima al-Zahra? Imam al-Hussein leaves him. The events of Muharram are about to happen. This pierces the heart of Hur ibn Yazid. Why? Because when Imam al-Hussein had called him that, may your mother have never given birth, he initially wanted to hit him with a similar response, but he remembered that's Fatima al-Zahra's son. So that awoke something from him inside. On the 9th of Muharram, Shimr ibn Dhul Jawshan begins to say 3 things. These 3 things, he hasn't changed yet, Hur. He hasn't changed. These 3 things begin to shape his mind. He's true. He's being sincere. He says, tomorrow, hands will be severed and heads will be raised on spears. Hur didn't like that one. Imam al-Hussein, just after Fajr, begins to gather firewood around the tents of his family. Firewood, and he ignites it. He ignites it because at night some of these devils would come and harass the family of Rasulullah. And so he wanted to shield them. Hur saw this happening. Shimr ibn Dhul Jawshan said, Ya Hussein, are you preparing yourself for the fires of hell from now? That also touched Hur. Hussein, Jahannam, these should not even be in the same sentence. Ya Hussein, are you preparing yourself for the fires of hell already? That got to Hur. The thing that really changed him was the next day on the 10th of Muharram in the morning. He hadn't yet changed. He hadn't yet moved. He hears Shimr say, after 3 arduous days of dry thirst, can you guys get water for my horse's hooves? I don't like that my horses are walking on very hot sand. Throw water on their hooves a bit. Hur says that you get coolness for the hooves of your horses, while the lips of the sons and daughters of Rasulullah are parched like stone. I can't handle seeing this anymore. And that moment, Hur ibn Yazid al-Riyahi looks at his son Bukair and he says, my son, we have to go. Al-Muhajir looks at Hur and he says, if I was to be asked, who was the bravest of all of Kufa? I would say it's you, Ya Hur. But today you look scared and you shake. What's going on? Hur says one line. This line, you should always say it to yourself whenever you find yourself between haram and halal. He said, أخير نفسي بين الجنة والنار. I find myself choosing between heaven and hell. فوالله لا أختار على الجنة شيئا. And I will never choose anything above heaven. And he takes his son and he goes with his horse and he charges towards the tents of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. He goes to him regretful, he goes to him remorseful, without any hope, and he doesn't believe Imam al-Hussein will ever forgive him, for he was the one who had blocked the waters from the sons and daughters of the children of Rasulullah. Hur ibn Yazid al-Riyahi goes to Imam al-Hussein. Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas emerges in front of him. Imam al-Hussein says, Ya Abu al-Fadl, move, let him come. Hur ibn Yazid jumps from his horse and he falls to the legs of Abu Abdullah and he says, Master, forgive me. I didn't know they wanted to kill you. I just was following orders. Look at the soft heart of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. He says, Oh Hur, we have already forgiven you. What kind of heart would do that? And some of us have the most petty grudges against our own family for nonsensical reasons. Come and look at Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. As that moment occurred, Hur says to Imam al-Hussein, allow me to be the first to fight in your way so that I atone for my sins. Hur goes to the field and begins to fight what were once his friends on the side of Yazid ibn Muawiyah. Hur ibn Yazid begins to fight one by one until they surround him and he falls to the ground. He calls out, Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah. Imam al-Hussein rushes to Hur. He removes his killers from him and he cradles him and says, Anta Hur kama sammatka ummuk. You are Hur, free like how your mother named, free in this life and in the afterlife. Hur ibn Yazid is not buried where the Imam and the Shuhada is buried. He's buried quite far if you go to Karbala. That's because, and I leave you with this line and we hear the Masa'ib by my dear brother soon. Hur ibn Yazid had been killed. Shimar ibn Dhul Joshan said, I need the horse riders to stomp all over the bodies of the Shuhada. They said that the bodies of the Shuhada are on the floor. Shimr said, trample over the body of Hur ibn Yazid. However, Hur ibn Yazid had family from Banu Riyaha on the side of the army of Umar ibn Sa'ad. They said, we allowed you to kill our family. We will not let you insult us by trampling him. Shimr ibn Dhul Joshan said, then trample over the body of Habib ibn Mudahar, the Ashab and Ansar al-Hussein. Habib ibn Mudahar is an Asadi, and the Asadi family were there to represent him. They said, we will not allow you to hurt the one who is from our family further. Then they said, trample over the body of Muslim ibn Awsaja, O horses of Allah. They said that we will not do so because his family is there. He said, then trample over the bodies of the family of Hussein. Trample over Akbar. They said, but Akbar's mother is related to Yazid. She is his first cousin through her grandmother Maymun. Yazid would not allow us if we stumble over him. He said, then trample over the body of Qasim. Qasim's body, a young boy, a teenager on the land. His mother is from the Bani Fazara. The Fazaris were there. One by one, trample over the body of Abbas. Abbas's mother, al-Banin, is a cousin to Shimr. He didn't allow it until he said that one line. Whose body lay on the ground, whose mother and father has no one to represent him. They said one body. trample over the body of Hussein. O horse riders of Allah, اركبي ودوسي على جسد الحسين عليه السلام. You go to Karbala, you see where the Madhbah al-Husayni is versus where he is buried is different. That's because of how much they kicked his body around on the land. O Fatima al-Zahra, if you were there to see your boy, as the Sha'ar Du'bal bin Ali says, أفاطم لو خلت الحسين مجدلا وقد مات عطشانا بشط فراتي.